Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Today we are going to do session 5 of our Leverage Leadership 2.0. This is our final session. We're going to discuss chapters 7 and 8. These chapters, as you get into this text deeper, become more of a need some personal reflection time. So we'll talk through some of the key points of the text, but I'll also outline for you some things that you can do on your own. That this text kind of guides you through step by step. That will be really powerful if you actually do that. So we'll share that along the way. And Emily is here, and she's going to monitor the chat box for us. But y'all feel free to participate along the way. Chapter 7 was about managing school leadership teams. So we're going to talk a little bit about the leadership team you have in place if you have one within your school. And then chapter 8 is about finding the time. So it's all about helping you prioritize your time, where the author of this text believes that you should allocate your time and things like that. So we'll go through both of those chapters today and wrap everything up. Today, this afternoon or tomorrow morning when Emily sends you the recording, you'll also get a link from us for a feedback survey. We're just looking for feedback from you on if this book study was helpful to you, kind of what ways was it helpful to you? Did you enjoy the format of it? Do you have a text in mind that we could consider for a future book study? All that good jazz. So if you would pretty please, that will help Emily and I just kind of learn to best support you and guide you through future book studies or not if you don't feel like it was meaningful, and work your minutes. To review our norms for a final time, we decided in session 1 to have respect for diverse perspectives. What happens in the group stays in the group, engage and remain active, and share the mic. And we'll practice these norms again today. So who would like to kick us off? What lingered from you from previous sessions? What have we talked about previously that you maybe have put into action or are still having questions about or would like to discuss further with the group?
I think just the overall focus that our number one goal is instructional leadership and creating the environment and coaching feedback for that, regardless of other things that might get in the way, that we need to keep the main thing.
Yeah.
Good point. A lot of times, especially as charter leaders, like we've discussed before, we can get a lot added onto our plate. So it's a reminder that it's okay to put your time in instruction, and you should put your time in instruction, and you are an instructional leader.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that has lingered with y'all from the previous sessions? All right, we'll keep going. So we talked at the end of our last session about reflection for, y'all please excuse my Yorkie. I can't let her outside because there's construction going on at my house. And I hope that she's not just going to sit here and bark. So I apologize. What does your leadership team look like? Who is your leadership team? Why have you chosen these leaders to sit alongside you and make decisions? Thinking about your last 3 leadership meetings, even though that might have been so that we could get COVID off of the agenda, but what did you spend your time on? So kind of talk us through, what does your leadership team look like, why, and what do you spend your time on within those meetings each time that y'all come together?
I'm waiting in the chat. Everyone's so quiet today. I think everyone's getting ready for holiday weekend.
Emily, this is Tanika Green. Hi, everyone.
Tanika.
Hey, so I guess I'll share. Our leadership team is made up of our head of school, and we have 2 campuses for those who don't know. So we have a middle school and an elementary school. So our leadership team is made up of our head of school. We have 2 chiefs, me, which is chief of academics, and then we have a chief that's over all business departments, and then we have 3 assistant principals. We have an assistant manages the elementary school, and then one that manages the middle school, and then we have an assistant principal because we're a Chinese immersion school that oversees our immersion program. So those 6 people are our leadership team, and as I explained, we all have different functions and work really well together. The last 3 meetings, and I tried to go back before COVID, was performance-based pay. We do a performance-based pay matrix that the teachers we've started, I think 3 years ago. The teachers are very, very familiar about what that is about. It looks at administrative duties, checking email, turning in things on time, different things like that. It talks about being a team player, coming out and helping with extracurricular activities or different academic nights or different things like that. Because we have some functions that some teachers have to be at that others don't, but if they come out and help and, different things like that, just stepping up and being a team player. It looks at, of course, a big chunk of it is your student performance. So we look at growth, not standard. So we look at where the students started and where they ended. So the teachers get a portion of money for that. And the last one, I can't remember what the last, classroom observations. So it ends up being like right at $1,000. So that was one of our meetings. We had a meeting on retention. We, the last probably 2 years, we've had a large amount of students that we've had to retain because we get, I don't know, some parents come and they feel like they're kind of upset with their district and they're like, I'm coming. So you all probably have that same experience. And we are so glad to get, we're glad to get students and get increased enrollment. But a lot of times some of the students that we get have a hard time. They have a hard time with our curriculum. So because we are, one of our things is rigorous academics, they have a hard time staying up with the rigorous academics in our classroom. So our retention is a whole process at the end of every year, because we have parents, of course, that push back. They come from districts that usually pass kids on. We have standards that we make sure that our students pass by the end of the year, and if they don't, we do hold them back. And then another meeting was on our Mandarin teachers, because we have different work visas, green cards, and different things. So our teachers are all over the place with their work visas and their applying for green cards and different things like that. So we meet with about that as well, and then meet with our attorney that handles all of our work visas and everything. So those were the last 3 meetings that we had.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Oh,
Anyone else want to take the mic? Okay, so like what Dr. Green shared, it seems like at East Point, their leadership team is made of across both school buildings and at varying levels from the top to assistant principal positions. And it sounds like each meeting had a focus of that just kind of fit with your time of year, where your visas come into play in the spring to get ready for the next year. Pay, obviously, or incentive pay obviously comes in at the end of the school year. So it seems like those items were time guided by student performance and instruction. Okay. So a discussion point that I would pose to you, are any of these areas that are presented on page 303 present in your own in your meetings? Go ahead.
You're kind of popping in and out.
Oh, sorry. Let me move 2 feet. Are there any of these errors that come into play on your agendas? Are you guilty of any of these things? And it's hard to not be guilty of this list. But it's a good reminder that, we're utilizing our time within our leadership team meeting. So page 303 outlines these errors, and are any of us, do we fall into these categories? More announcements than instruction. So are we spending our leadership team time informing everyone of things going on within the building, operational things, spending time on others? Are we doing more reading about leadership than doing? So we want to have action within our team meetings. Do we have more opinion than evidence? So are we stating all the things that we think we could do? We have evidence to back up our actions, and our walkthroughs or observations without feedback. So are we talking about what we're seeing in the classroom, but we're not sitting down and making the time to have those feedback sessions with the educators? So who would like to discuss this further? Are we guilty in any of these areas? Do we strategically make sure that we don't go down these paths? What kinds of things?
Tanika says walk through observations without feedback.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the takeaways that we can take from this text is that we're not going to schedule the walkthrough till we schedule the feedback. So making sure that our schedule has time for that feedback meeting after, and then we ensure that we get in there. So that's a good piece that you can put into play, Tanika, before the next school year.
So part of our team meetings also surround like planning things that don't have anything to do with instruction, like making sure someone is owning certain things that we've been assigned to do or that need to be done in Epicenter, or reviewing, having someone who was tasked with planning the Black History Month Assembly present to us the plan and giving them feedback, which can take, 15 to 20 minutes. So I think it's important to separate like a leadership focus on instruction meeting and then a leadership focus on running the school operational meeting, because obviously the instruction is important and comes first, but you do have to have a meeting where you go over logistics and they review it with you as principal to make sure that that it's going to work. Like they might do the bulk of the work that took them 3 hours, but there has to be a 10 or 15 minute review with the principal of what that looks like, and go over. And you can do some of that by reading it and then giving feedback, but there's value in the different perspectives. Like, because I don't do lunch on the daily basis, I always include the person who handles that side of things, because they're going to say, oh, in the plan, what about this that I don't think of?
Right.
So anyway, I just think it's important to schedule time for both types of meetings so that your instructional meeting isn't taken over with these other things, but then that you do have time to get the logistical things done that have to be done to operate your school.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a great point, is that all of these things are important, but there's a time and a place. And so it's really just delineating your purpose of each of those meetings to respect everyone's time. Thank you for sharing.
Lynette,
Such a succinct way to put that, Emily.
Lynette in the chat says, announcements always go first. Feedback tends to be second. We're working on changing this next year. Feedback needs to take a role. Yes. And then Tanika just agreed. Tanika says agendas are essential for my meetings. Yes, agendas. Don't waste time.
Yeah, we have an agenda that is a shared Word, like shared Google document, so that I can do a base agenda, but then everybody involved in the agenda, like my guidance counselors, my school counselors, know that there is a section of the meeting that can address specific questions that they have about maybe a student seeking an exception to something or someone they're troubled with. Like, we dismiss everyone and just have the counselor meeting after the main meeting. And so they can always go in and add on the agenda so that we don't forget to go over those things.
Yeah. Some of the announcement things too, it's like Mary Nell's mentioning, there's a lot of things that talk about in these meetings that we need to have live in front of us to offer feedback. And then there's some of these announcements that we could just communicate via a memo or a weekly newsletter, you know, an email to staff or your leadership team. So it's also deciphering announcements have value coming in front of you and or could just happen in an email. I'll probably have that coffee mug that said just sat in another meeting that could have been an email. So keeping that in mind too, of what can people just read in from you versus actually partake in a conversation on. All right. So to keep us moving along, what are your thoughts on these two statements from the text? So page 316 says, are the intensity and nature of the job too difficult to overcome? So many principals believe they don't have control over their time, but in reality, your own time is the one thing you and the principal can control. This is thought-provoking to me when reading it, as we always say, well, I don't have time, well, I don't have time. But the book is basically saying, this is the one thing you do have control over. You do have control over your schedule, and you do have control over time. So what are your thoughts on these statements?
Emily, this is Tanika again. One quick thing that I thought about when you just shared that quote was, I've been doing a lot of reading on transformative or transformational, depending on what book you read, leaders. And one of the aspects of that kind of leadership is making sure that you share the leadership role. And I think, and I've done it both ways, when you try to do everything yourself, you don't have enough time. But when you train staff up in a way and allow them to use their expertise, then you do have enough time to get into the classroom, the things that good instructional leaders do. And so making sure that you share the leadership roles and find those people in your buildings, because we have some awesome people in our buildings that do awesome things in different areas, and allowing them to step up to the plate and developing them into great leaders while you can, you know, prioritize your time for the things that you need to do. So that's one thing that I'm learning, and I thought that was really neat, and it just made me think about that with this quote. Yeah,
that's a great point. I have always been told that I'm a really good delegator. So like you said, Tanika, it's a matter of surrounding ourselves with the right people. And then even though we may be type A and want to do everything on our own, being able to relinquish the control because they have the ability to do it just as good as we do, but then just have our oversight on it. So you're exactly right. Surrounding yourself with a solid team that allows you the time to get in. And if you're trying to do it all on your own, then it is hard to get the time because we're not surrounding ourselves with people and allowing them to participate with us. Very good. You're getting a lot of yeses in the chat box.
Yeah, and I'll say, you know, my mom was sick and then passed away this year. And so, you know, the idea of delegating was really left with no choice. And I had amazing team members who stepped up. And that was really helpful in shifting some of my perspective on it. But I still laughed out loud when I read that sentence when I was first reading it, because there have been so many days in my administrative career that have literally been hijacked. You know, I think back to when we had a major drug bust that demanded every single administrator and several interns in my last school. And this year where we had a major traumatic incident where a girl, you know, wanted to commit suicide at our school. And we had to immediately assemble the whole mental health trauma team. and things like that. Like there is a lot that you can control. And I think that it's important to set the parameters and to delegate what you can delegate. But I also think that to ignore the fact that something's not going to walk in the door that can hijack your day is a little bit pie in the sky. And I think that having had a principal that very tightly runs like his schedule based on like this leverage leadership to the point that the rest of the APs and all felt that we couldn't even get to him when we needed him in that emergency. It was frustrating. And so he felt really great about what he was doing, but his entire team was like, we needed your input as the principal, and you just like completely like locked your door and wouldn't give us access in that moment. And that's frustrating. So I just think there has to be some sort of balance.
Yeah, that's very true. And I just laughed out loud when you said that they were like, wait, no, you're not available when we truly need you. And even though the scenario was not funny, it's funny that they felt that they couldn't approach him about it. So yeah, like you said, we all need to be human and things happen. And there is a time where what school leader can say that their day went exactly as they had planned? So this is what we shoot for, but somewhere we'll fall amongst the clouds. So yeah, very good point that we need to remember to be flexible as well. Any other thoughts on these quotes? All right. So this is one of the do this things that I wanted to present to you. This is going to take you some time, and you may actually not be able to do this properly until you know what your fall looks like. I know that we're all in the space of creating our schedules and what our daily operations are going to look like come August. So this may be something that you need to, I would say, set aside an hour of your time to kind of get your shell going, and then revisit this maybe monthly to kind of re-see. So I would say mark these pages 318 to 328 and ensure that you have time built in to do this with a weekly schedule. But it may not make sense for you to waste that hour right now unless you already know what your fall is going to look like. So the steps basically say, like, remind yourself that you should be 12 to 1, build your leadership team and start there so that your coaching and feedback capacity for the start of the year is 12 educators, which the text lays out as manageable for yourself. You'll have to obviously put in those times of the day where you should be present, whether that's you're present at, breakfast and arrival, whether you're present for your students and families and kind of in the hallways at dismissal or lunch. So set aside those times where you need to be visible to your staff and your students and your families. Then locking in meetings that are outstanding, like your leadership team meeting, your staff meetings, things like that, whether you're attending grade level planning sessions. Then adding in step 4 is those high leverage pieces where you're observing and offering feedback. So adding those layers to your schedule, kind of those open windows. And then step 5, building in the observation piece. So you've got your feedback, you've got your time, lesson plans and all of that. And now we're actually getting into the classroom. And then 6 reminds you to not to forget about culture. And so whatever that looks like for you each week or each month on building in that periodic check on staff culture is important. And then to block time off for yourself in step 7 to work on projects, to work on charter compliance pieces, to work on things that are important to you. Maybe you're revisiting some policies and procedures that you need to actually spend time on. So outlining all of these times for yourself, I would say you could get a skeleton going in an hour and then revisit it as you see fit. But I wouldn't necessarily say right now is the time for us to drop an hour unless you already know what your fall looks like. So who thinks that this is something that you'll actually do? Is this completely farce and not attainable? Like, what are your thoughts on actually sitting down and taking the time to schedule yourself through these steps outlined on those pages?
Quiet today. Sarah says, I love this and I'm looking forward to applying it. You're right about knowing what to plan for. I wish that we all did. We
know.
We wish we could tell you.
I know. We've had this discussion so many times with staff members in the last week. Like, we just wish we had an answer for everyone, but we know that you're all building your plan. So we're awaiting the 35 plans to be presented to us too. So what decisions you've made.
I think it's a great idea. We already have some things like team meetings and observations and things like that I'd been building in. And one of the things that I learned, because it's my first experience in this role sharing a calendar with multiple people, is the importance of the number 7. Where instead of leaving open time on my calendar that I know what I'm going to do, even like check email daily or something like that, to actually write that in so that people who are looking at my calendar are trying to schedule with me by looking at my calendar can see what it is that I'm doing and have that blocked off. Because this whole sharing a calendar thing is also new in the principalship role.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we all do within our office as well, as we share our calendars. And we always say, you can schedule us for something, but just because you don't think that hour is important, I may be drowning in tons of them that hour is important to me. So yeah, even some of us will put like hold or do not kind of things on there so that it's to those that are looking to schedule something with you. Yes, this hour of email cleanup is it needs to happen. Lynette says she likes that this takes it even a little bit further than just adding events to your calendar. So we're not just saying, oh, I have an assembly here and a leadership team meeting here, and I have a formal adept evaluation here, but that we're actually taking the time to block off all of those minutes of time. It's a good perspective to have. Like, I'm not just adding events to my calendar. This all has a purpose.
Yeah, like I do Friday roundup. And so I spend, well, in the summer it's Thursday, but I spend probably 30 minutes once a week just looking forward 2 weeks and trying to make sure if I know I'm going to have a busy week, then I'm going to plan a lot of my project work the week before, or, you know, just try to get ahead of the calendar so that I'm using my time the best way that I can. Even if I'm, you know, like today, I've been on the phone since 8. So I knew I wasn't going to have any project time today. So it's just helpful to kind of try to look ahead and use your time more meaningfully.
Any other thoughts on taking the time to walk through these steps? All right. Time for you to share. What did you highlight, mark, within these 2 chapters for the good of the group that you would either like feedback on or to talk through from chapter 7 and 8? Right, nothing else. All right, so takeaways that we've left you with each session, what can you implement immediately? So building out your schedule for 2021, although you may need to push pause for just a second till your distance plan for the fall is set up, but building out your schedule for 2021, what times in your schedule are non-negotiable, what times are flexible, and then communicating that precious time to all staff. So it'll be powerful for you as a leader to communicate on day one. When you look at my calendar, this is the time that I'm available to you, and this is the non-negotiable time for myself because I have all kinds of priorities. So setting that precedent from the beginning. What can you implement with your staff? Prioritizing your leadership team goals based on your 2021 needs. Taking the time alongside your leadership team to what goals can we set for ourselves? What can we attain in this school year that's going to make a difference for student outcomes? Two quotes stood out as kind of remembering long-term beyond this, just our book study. But 300 says, build a culture of practice for your leaders where getting better is the norm, not the exception. So we will always work to get better. And it's not something we're going out of our way to doing. We just do. And then page 335, this stood out as the monthly map is in effect a list of the most important things you should be doing with each task separated by month. So taking the time to do a long range plan and saying in February, I need to think about staffing for next year. And November, I need to start thinking about end of course exams and getting ready for the next semester, those kinds of things. So those monthly tasks that you can look long-term across the year and separating out for yourself priorities across each month. Anyone else have anything to add to this? Things that you could implement immediately or that you need your staff for, or other quotes that you?
I think you just read this one, but Lynette says, getting better is the norm. Love this. Yes.
Anything else? All right. So the last thing before we wrap up is kind of just, we've gotten to the end of the text and we're kind of in this now what. So really take some time to reflect on your independently and say, okay, now that you look at this text as a whole, like what are the pieces that need to be important? Like what does your staff and your students need from you as a leader that you can implement based on your from this text? So I meme where you're like, okay, now I'm floating, I'm going where I'm supposed to be, but how do I fix this? So kind of what fixes do your staff and students need from you right now, and just take some time to put a plan in place based on your learning so that you can be most effective before the school year.
Lynette also says all of these things use the growth mindset. That's so valuable for all of us too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to have this wrapped by the beginning of July so that you guys would have time to kind of breathe for a minute, hopefully, and take some of what you read and what you learned and see how you can change before even the beginning of the school year, which I know is so crazy because nobody really knows what's going to happen. But if you have time to see what you can do and make changes, assuming that we're going back normal, then take advantage.
Anything else for the good of the group, everyone? All right, this might be our fastest session. Thank you very, very, very much for participating. You offered your time and volunteered your time to do this because this was important to you. And so Emily and I thank you for doing this alongside us. And I know I'm probably speaking for Emily when I say this too, but it's for us to just kind of have a weekly outside meeting with you to collaborate and grow and learn alongside each of you. So thank you for that. And like I said before we began, when Emily sends out the recording for today, if y'all would just offer us some feedback so that we could tailor your our future book studies and support for you on what your needs are. We want to make sure that the information we're giving you and the time for it is important to you. So we accept your feedback, and you'll see that survey come out later this afternoon or tomorrow morning.
Yep. Thank you,
Anything else,
Lynette.
Emily?
No, that's it. Thanks, guys. Enjoy your holiday weekend. And I promise as soon as we have any COVID information, we will give it to you. We just don't.
Thanks, everyone. We'll stick around for just a couple minutes if you need us.
Rachel.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to stop this, Emily.
Okay.